Okay, we'll call to order the Planning Commission meeting here tonight. It's Wednesday, February 9th at 7 p.m. First thing, we'll do a roll call. So, Randa?
Mr. Dalpace?
Here.
Mr. Mahausen?
Here.
Mr. Sarah?
Present.
Mr. Volus? Mr. LePage?
Here. Okay, first item on the agenda here is the submission of January 5th, 2022 meeting minutes for approval. I think all the commission members have the minutes, so if there's not any questions, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve? Second.
Okay, to call this to a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right, our first application tonight. This is application number 21NCPC-0016, the preliminary plat for Sanctuary Phase 5, and this item was tabled from our January 5th meeting. So if anybody from the applicant would like to start the presentation off, that would be great. And just a reminder for anyone that speaks tonight, please state your name and your address before you make your comments. And please speak into the microphone so we can get it recorded properly.
My name is Rich Costin. I'm representing McKinley Apple Grove LTD. My address is 8230 Pittsburgh Avenue, North Canton. Again, we are here tonight submitting our preliminary plan for Sanctuary number 5. It's the last phase of the single-family lots. At last month's meeting, we asked to be tabled so we could respond to staff comments that were brought up at the meeting. And I believe that all those issues have been resolved and we've addressed those. This plan, again, is in line with the previous plans that have come before the Planning Commission, going all the way back to 2002. We have addressed the original city comments, which was length of block that had been addressed, and the open space requirement. So those were addressed in last month's meeting. It is our understanding that there will be 2 conditions being proposed by staff for the approval of this. One is vacation of the Woodside Street, and the other is an access agreement with the North Canton City Schools in the city. And I want to let you know that we are on board with that as far as the development goes. So, in our submission, following up from last month's meeting, we have the preliminary plan has been cleaned up, basically for clarity. It now more accurately represents what is existing utilities and what are proposed utilities. The plan before was going, way back, and it still showed things that were proposed. So it's been cleaned up. Also for clarity, I think we've outlined Phase 5 so that we know what we're addressing here or proposing. So, lastly, I have Mike Kendall from GBC Design. He's with the engineering firm, so he's here to answer any technical questions. And with that, I'm here to answer your questions.
Okay. We can move here to comments from the city on this. I know we talked extensively last month about this, so Mr. Van Gundy, if you could just recap and go over the items that were addressed in between now and then.
Contention that was previously presented as condition number 3, and that condition was stipulating that the HOA maintain the storm drainage. After much discussion with the legal counsel and staff, the consensus is that the HOA is not an applicant of this item concern in the future is still the property owner's responsibility and would be addressed more reactively as opposed to proactively with the condition. So with that, we have dropped the third condition and bring before you the same first two conditions. And with that, staff does recommend approval with the two conditions. The first one being the approval of the preliminary map is conditioned on the vacation of the Woodside Avenue extension easement through City Council. Condition number 2 would be subject to the execution of the emergency access / pedestrian easement between the North Canton City Schools and the City of North Canton. And each of those items are moving forward in the respective processes and executing those agreements and easements. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. At this time, any questions from committee members? Okay, we'll open questions from any other audience members on this topic. Okay. Well, at this time, if there's no other questions from our commission members or no other comments from the city or applicant, I would entertain a motion on this item.
Motion to approve as amended and as submitted.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second that motion.
Okay. We will call this to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. All right, our next application on the agenda tonight is application number 21NCPC-0017, the final plat for Monticello Phase 8, including 15 lots and 12.97 acres. So at this time, would anybody from the applicant like to discuss this item?
Good evening, my name is Brent Artman. My address is 13710 Cleveland Avenue Northwest, Uniontown, Ohio. I'm here, I'm representing the owners of the development AMC Land Company. We are proposing to finalize the Monticello subdivision. This will be the last phase within the subdivision. It's 12.97 acres left, and we are here to get the approval for the final plat for the final 15 lots within the development. All the improvements have been installed. We're out there now finalizing some of the private utilities, getting the electric completed and the gas completed, but those should be done shortly. It's pretty much cut and dry.
Okay. Mr. Van Gundy, would you like to provide a summary on where we're at with this?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Artman's office has been working with the city engineer's office on a few remaining minor details, if you will. And in my coordination with the city engineer's office, they didn't feel any of the minor details left outstanding warranted any conditions of approval. So at this point, staff does recommend an approval without any conditions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from our commission members on this?
Yeah, I would like to excuse myself from this since I live in Monticello.
Okay.
So I will not be voting on it.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Any other questions from any audience members on this issue? Okay, if there's no other comments or from the city or any questions from our members here, I would entertain a motion on this item at this time.
I move to approve application number 21NCPC 0017.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. So we'll call to vote, application number 21 NCPC-0017, final plat for Monticello Phase 8, including 15 lots and 12.97 acres as submitted. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? And please make a note that Mr. Sarah has abstained from this item. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is part of our public meeting portion. This is an ordinance amending Chapter 1127, Establishment of Districts and Map, specifically Section 1127.01, Establishment of Districts of the Codified Ordinances of the City of North Canton, in order to remove the chart of districts contained therein. So at this time, Martin or Mr. Young, if you want, I'm not sure who wants to start on this, but if you want to give us a summary of where we're at on this.
Essentially, this is a cleanup item. It's a redundant table. The information contained in the table is also contained within the text of the language, so it does remove another point in the ordinance that would require an update, and doesn't seem to bring value to that. I missed any part of that, Mr. Young?
No, the true reason we were seeking to remove this is that potentially forgetting to update this table would cause it to not match the actual list of districts and cause confusion, so we're trying to eliminate the potential to cause confusion.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from commission members on this? All right, well, I would entertain a motion on this item. Oh, sorry. My fault. Thank you, Tom, for the reminder. Any questions or comments from audience members on this? Okay. Would entertain a motion on this item.
I'll make a motion to approve the amending of chapter 1127 with section 1127.01 as outlined.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a second. Call to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, the next item, number 6, an ordinance amending Title 5, Administration of the Planning and Zoning Code of the Codified Ordinances of the City of North Canton in order to establish more efficient and effective zoning review and amendment process. Mr. Van Gundy or Mr. Young, if you could give us an explainer on this as well.
I'll go ahead and start on this one. So as I'm sure all four of you are aware from your prior service on this and ZBOA, 3 years ago, city leadership started an effort to piece by piece review and, if needed, rewrite each section of the city's zoning code. The first large chunk of that came to you guys last year as the new Main Street districts. And then this is the second large chunk to come through. And so what we're looking at tonight is Title 5 of our zoning code, which is all the administrative rules of how amendments move through council and planning commission, how variances work, appeals, things like that. So overall, for the entire title, in each chapter, pretty much we've tried to go through and condense and simplify the language as much as possible so that, you know, your average person applying for a variance or an appeal or a zoning change understands what's being asked of them. Some of the previous language was kind of confusing. In addition, we've updated titles and references and things like that. But what I'd really like to draw your attention to, we've made 3 major sort of functional changes to how the process works. So the first change is relating to notice requirements. So in the 2021 community survey, we asked a number of questions relating to how many people actually read the Canton repository, and of those, who sees our legal publishings, which cost a fair amount of money for us to do every year. We found that less than a fourth of the city's population reads the Canton repository at all, and then roughly another 5% off of that gets a physical paper which might have our legal advertisement in it. We made the assumption that if you only had an online subscription, you probably aren't clicking to the legal advertisements webpage. So in response to that, we've modified how notice for both City Council and Planning Commission ZBOA meetings would work. So instead of publishing in the newspaper, there is a requirement that the notice be on our website, that it be subscribable. That's all in Ohio State Code. We can't overrule that. What we have changed is the physical mailing of notices. So previously, under the current code, I should say, we're required to send a mail notice to the property owner and to everyone within 200 feet, which is sort of an arbitrary circle. And there was an exemption for zoning amendments that if you were doing more than 10 parcels, you didn't have to send that notice. Under what we're proposing here, we would have to mail every affected property owner and every neighbor of every affected property owner, regardless of how many pieces of property we're talking about. And that was kind of in response to some complaints about the Main Street zoning and a major zoning change ahead of my time. There were some complaints that we didn't tell people because we weren't required to. And so we're just kind of saying, all right, we're just going to make it require that we're going to tell you, no matter how many people we have to tell. So how it's literally written is that, if your property is affected, anybody who borders your property, and then anybody who would border you if not for a street or public right-of-way in between, will all get physical mail notices, in addition to everything that's required by state law for public meetings. So they'll be on our website, they'll be on the bulletin boards, they'll be sent to subscribers who want to subscribe, all of those things. So that's our first sort of structural change. And all of those notices would require a 7-day minimum for ZBOA and Planning Commission and a 30-day minimum for City Council before the meeting happens. The second sort of structural change we've made is that under the current code, appeals and variances are in the same chapter of our code, and they're treated essentially identically, and it sort of makes it confusing if you're applying for one of those, what things you need to comply with. So we've separated those two each into their own specific chapters with more clarified and distinct processes that affect just those items. That'll affect ZBOA more than you all as Planning Commission. And then third, and probably the most significant change, is that in response to comments that the city was at times difficult to work with for development, an amendment is being sought to change the development review process so that if what you're proposing fully complies with the zoning code as it is laid out, you're not seeking a conditional use, you're not seeking a variance, you're not seeking to not comply with our written law in any way, you do not need to come to Planning Commission anymore. All you need to do is apply for and receive all of your permits and fire approvals and things like that. And so the intent in seeking that amendment, if I can speak for council, is that we're trying to make it more business friendly, that you can move faster, and if you're complying with all of the laws as we've set it out, why would we want to slow you down? You're doing what we asked you to do. So those are sort of the greatest hits, if you will.
Anything else, Martin, from your end, or?
Yeah, if I may add to the development review portion of that, I'd like to point out that the development review is a prescriptive review, meaning code or it does not meet the code. So in that administrative review, if the project does not meet the code requirements, then it simply gets turned down, sent back for corrections or comments. Also contained in the proposed text is if there was a project that either didn't quite fit the black and white of the code, there was some nuances in there, the director reviewing that as that administrative process has the option to send that project to planning commission anyway. So they're not forced to do the administrative review on that. And of course, this is in contrast to the conditional use process, which is not changing. The conditional use process will continue to go before you as those applications come in. Of course, this is a discretionary review process, so much of the items that when you're, as you know, when you're reviewing these conditional use permits, it's general rules that you're reviewing the project as an overarching concern, and you would present as a body each of the concerns and place those conditions as it was warranted for that specific project. That concludes all I wanted to add to that, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Good. Thanks, Mr. Van Gundy. Okay, at this time, any questions from commission members? Do you want to lead us off, Tom?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I am a little bit concerned, I mean, in the old section of 1175.05 for public hearing, I understand about the newspaper, but the 5% that gets newspaper, then I'm one of the 5%.
Well, 20% receive it.
Okay. But I am a little bit concerned, in the old section, it said that the planning commission shall hold a public hearing on proposed conditional use. Notice of such public hearing shall be given by first-class mail to the applicant and to the property owners within 200 feet of the property on which the use is proposed. And what you're looking at doing is striking that out and only giving it to the abutting properties. I understand the complexity of this and mailing out first-class mail to all the properties around that, but I personally feel that that should be maintained and kept. The Main Street district was unusual, and that would have been very, or is a very serious mailing out first mail 200 feet from the Main Street district area, but these are always isolated usually to a handful of notifications. So I just think we owe it to the public that if there's going to be a change within that 200 feet, those property owners should be notified by receiving a certified mail or first-class mail that says that this is coming to the planning commission in a public hearing. So that's my only concern that I have with this proposal.
Okay. Mr. Young, any?
Well, we did.
So you mentioned it would be the abutting property owner and anyone adjacent to the abutting property owner, right? Is that what you want to be?
The affected property owner and anybody whose property touches that property or is just separated by a public right-of-way. So your neighbor directly across the street from you would also get a notice.
Okay.
And it is slightly reduced from the 200 feet. The change was made because we felt that the abutting property owners was a more
Yeah,
distinct
Yeah,
these
I,
people must
I
be
understand,
notified.
I understand your concern, Mr. Sarah, and then I'm thinking of the opposite situation where they're larger properties. So the 200 feet would only affect the directly abutting properties, but in this scenario, you're saying the neighbor would also get one, so possibly someone past 200 feet would get the notification. Am I understanding that correctly?
Potentially.
Yeah.
And another concern with the 200 feet was the code was not very specific on where we're measuring the 200 feet from. So is it from the center of the property, and then what do we call the center of the property? Is it from the property line? So we thought this was a more clear, these
Yeah.
people are definitely getting notified.
Yeah.
But the approach the city always took in the past is that it was from the line, the property line, 200 feet out. And that's what I think should be kept.
Any other comments from commission members on this, or thoughts?
I'm sorry, and 200 feet is undefined at this point?
So the current code is that within 200 feet, and it is not specific on where to measure, but Mr. Sarah is correct that we have historically treated it as from 200 feet within the property line.
What's in front of you, the language will state, notice of such public hearing shall be given by first-class mail to the applicant and to the property owners abutting upon or separated by a street or alley from the property on which the use is proposed.
So, yeah, is it the Ohio Revised Code that has jurisdiction over this as far as how neighbors are, if it's within, what is the appropriate?
No, so, public meeting, Ohio code-wise, all we would truly have to do is say, we're having a meeting on this date at this location. So this notice requirement is prescribed by our code, and I do think it is important to tell the neighbors that, hey, we're gonna change the zoning on your neighbor's property, especially if it's gonna go from, residential to commercial. That could really affect somebody's property value. So while this is not required by the Ohio Revised Code, it is, I feel, an important piece to keep in. I think the disagreement here is whether to do 200 feet or just adjacent neighbor.
I've seen it. I've seen other locales use the proposed, what is proposed, just the adjacent property owners. To me, as a neighbor, I understand, Mr. Sarah's concern, the 200 feet. I do think that's somewhat arbitrary because the lot size, can ruin that whole scenario. If you have a larger lot, you could literally be notifying two people, which makes no sense. I think if you're truly going to affect, want everyone in the neighborhood to understand where you're coming from with the change, I think it should be the abutting people, the abutting parcels, and any parcels abutting the direct parcel that's affected. Meaning,
So you do two.
basically 2 layers deep. Because in a large lot, like I said, you could just be asking 2 people, is this, are you guys good with this? And then the whole neighborhood around them is like, what just happened? Because they would have, literally no idea unless they were really following the issue.
But that's why the 200-foot rule was.
Well, yeah, but even with the 200 feet, if you have a lot that's bigger than 200 feet, the 200 feet would be negated. You could notify one person and be within 200 feet.
Plus the 200 feet is arbitrary from where
Yeah.
it starts or,
Yeah.
if we're
You know
gonna-
what
if
I'm,
it's
you know
gonna
what
be
I'm
200 feet,
If
it's
you have
gotta be
lots
defined.
around a small parcel, and those lots are longer than 200 feet, then no one else knows except maybe 1 or 2 parcels that are directly abutting that parcel. So I think the 200 feet has always been questionable in my eyes, because I've run into that before. And it's like, what does 200 feet mean? It doesn't make sense. But my concern is that if you're just doing the abutting parcels, the neighborhood could potentially not know what's going on, which something like this can affect the whole neighborhood, especially with a major zoning change or conditional use or whatever it may be. That would be my 2 cents on it. Is there, before we open this up for public discussion, is there any other concerns with any of the other items that the city has brought up in this change? With our powers, the powers, what gets reviewed by the planning commission, what doesn't get reviewed, that process especially.
Just one question, I don't know if it's relevant, is there a significant cost impact or change in advertising one way versus another?
On the mailing and the 200 feet, no. On eliminating the newspaper, yes. I do not know exactly how much your all publishings cost, but I can tell you from my publishings on council side, I spend upwards of $15,000 annually.
Yeah, it's significantly more for the city to advertise than a member of the public. Okay, at this time, I think from the commission side, we'll take a break, and I would like to open this up for any of the members from the audience that would like to address this issue or have some discussion on it. Okay. Commission members, any other thoughts, comments? On the review process, I think streamlining that has very good intentions. We've had the issues in the past where someone's, come to planning commission and then had to go to board of zoning appeals and then had to loop back, stuck in this loop. So hopefully that can help eliminate some of that, because I know that's happened and I feel bad for those applicants when that does arise. So, Mr. Van Gundy, if it doesn't meet the code and they say, well, we can't make this work under your current ordinances, at that point, would you just say to them, well, you're going to have to go to Board of Zoning Appeals if you can get it changed in that fashion? Would that be the path? Someone comes in and you review it and you say, hey, everything's good, but this one item, and you would have to get you'd have to go to zoning appeals to get that. Would you just send them straight there instead of commission, then zoning appeals, and then back to you? Or how would that process work?
Most of the projects, you are having those conversations during the review process, so if it truly is, there is no other way to accomplish what they're wanting to accomplish. We do have that conversation with them and guide them through the process. And further, when we send out any adversarial or letter that has an adverse impact, we do include an appeal clause in there that they can appeal it. But ultimately, yes, it would go from that point, then they could apply to the zoning board of appeals for the variance or an appeal, however.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Questions?
Well, I guess I would like to make a motion to accept the amending of Title V, Administration. But in my motion, I want to clarify Section 1177.05, which is public hearing and notice by the planning commission. Section B, give everyone a chance to look that up. section B, I'd like to amend that to say, notice of such public hearing shall be given by first-class mail to the applicant and to the property owners abutting upon or separated by a street or alley from the property on which the use is proposed, and the property owners within 200 feet of the property line on which the use is proposed. Or maybe it's not and, maybe it's or. So I add or property owners within 2 feet of the property line on which the use is proposed.
Okay, this is how I have your amendment, your motion. Motion to accept the amending of Title V, clarifying 117705B. Notice of such public hearing shall be given by first-class mail to the applicant and to the property owners abutting upon or separated by a street or alley from the property on which the use is proposed, and the property owners within 200 feet of the proposed property.
Feet of the property line on which the use is proposed.
Just for clarity, you would want all of the notice requirements throughout this title to mirror that, not just this one here.
Very good point, Ben, yes.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We will call this item to vote. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next item on the agenda. An ordinance amending Chapter 145, Planning Commission of the Codified Ordinances of the City of North Canton. Okay. Mr. Young, would you like to take it away?
I will, and if you'll grant me leave, I'd like to talk about 7 and 8 together.
Oh, yes, we can talk about 8 together as well, so I'll just read that out. We'll talk about both 7 and 8. Number 8 is an ordinance amending Chapter 147, Zoning and Building Standards Board of Appeals of the Codified Ordinances of the City of North Canton.
Both of these ordinances, or these rewritings of these chapters, are sort of companion pieces to number 6, what we just talked about. So they pull first sections that already existed in the zoning code and moves them to the administrative code and the chapter specifically about that body. And then we've also added some standard language that we generally include in all of the chapters of public bodies that council creates. So both of these chapters, one for Planning Commission, one for ZBOA, both now have quorum, that you guys have the right to establish rules, when you guys meet regularly, what needs to be in your minutes, which that was pre-existing for both boards. Just sort of standardize that all the boards in the city have similar regulations in the same place. But again, many of the things in here were already in the zoning code. We're just proposing moving them to the administrative code instead.
Okay. Any questions from commission members on these two items? Any questions from our audience members tonight? Okay, if there's nothing else from our commission members, I'd entertain a motion on item 7 and/or actually, we should probably do them individually, so item 7 and then item 8, if you would. We can come to that next. So item 7, an ordinance amending Chapter 145, Planning Commission of the Codified Ordinances of the City of North Canton. Any motions?
I'll motion to approve amending chapter 145 as submitted.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll call to vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, number 7 passes. And then number 8, an ordinance amending Chapter 147, Zoning and Building Standards, Board of Appeals of the Codified Ordinances of the City of North Canton. Do we have a motion?
Move to amend chapter 147.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. We'll call to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion passes. That is all we have on the agenda tonight. So at this time, I'll consider a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
I'll second. All in favor?